Welcome back, guys. My name is Sam Kopak. You are locked into Parkour Coach Companion, the place for parkour coaching, the place for discussion on parkour mentality, how we train, what makes us tick, always with some great guests and some very interesting conversations. I hope you're doing good out there, guys. Maybe you're in the car with your friends on the way to a jam or a competition. Maybe it's a takeover. Or you could be kicking back on a long flight, ready for a new adventure in a new city. Whatever it is, wherever you are, really glad to have you on board. My guest today is Louis Allan, who is a self-proclaimed phobonaut. What the hell does that mean? Well, he's really into fear and exploring fear. In this conversation, that is our main topic, which should be familiar to anyone practicing parkour. It is integral to our practice. We all have to face it, and as such is something that I'm really interested in myself. As soon as I saw that Louis was doing fear workshops, I knew we absolutely had to have a conversation, and this one did not disappoint. So please lock in, listen in, get yourself comfortable. This is episode 52 with Louis Allan. Well, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you on. We met a long time ago when I think we both had much longer hair.
Yeah.
And we were doing, I think, our level 2 parkour level 2 coaching qualification, yes. I think. And yes. I specifically remember you doing a really nice lache up some stairs using a blue kind of railing that was sticking out of a wall that was part of
yes.
or something like that.
Yes, yeah. Near Alexandra Park or something. I can't remember that name of that area, but yeah, that was fun. It was a good time.
I remember kind of spending time with you then, and then really not seeing you much for a long time until, from what I can remember, seeing you in Project Underground 11 this year, which was a real treat to see you. And not only that, but you competed. So take us through a little bit of your decision making about wanting to compete, and also just to come to Project Underground. I've not seen you there before, I don't think. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of linked with a few changes that's happened in my life in the last year. But like since January, I've been traveling a lot. I've been doing a few competitions. A big part of that is thanks to a friend of mine, Jacob. And we recently went out to Dubai to do a competition called Gov Games. And then he mentioned doing this, and I was like, yeah, why not? And yeah, I've never actually been in a parkour competition before, so it felt local, and I don't know, I'm in a process of trying to taste life more and do a lot more. So like any kind of opportunity that comes, I'm just trying to say yes. So he said, let's do that. And I was like, okay, let's do that. And I didn't really have any expectations. I knew I wanted to do a competition, because I hadn't done one before. I think I'd applied to a Santorini one years ago. But yeah. And yeah, so the process of doing that contest was really fun. I think the style run is where I had a lot of my attention. And the style run, just because I feel like that's where you can express yourself the most. The speed run is really nice. Unfortunately, we made it there 5 minutes before the start of the speed run. So we didn't have much time to prepare.
Yeah, that really isn't, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the style run I was really focusing on, and I think I was just focusing on that initial move, the backflip across the gap.
Oh yeah.
So that was really fun. I think my mindset going into that was similar to a lot of the things I've developed through cliff jumping. Just being in that position, and it's quite similar already, you're quite high up. So I felt quite comfortable in that position. And then looking at the backflip across the gap was really nice. It was really interesting. It felt really doable, and that's what I've been focusing a lot of my training on recently. Is like, where can I see fear as an obstacle, and have a play around with that.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into that a little bit, because that's my kind of first point of conversation that I had on this big list that I've got. Where we're going to be talking all about fear, and who knows which directions we're going to go in. I was really struck by your style run because, well, firstly, I had no idea what you were going to do. I don't think anyone else did, and I want you to. Okay, let's just explain for listeners who weren't there. So, so Lewis was looking at starting his style run with a big, high layout back pre, basically. So kind of like doing a backflip over a roof gap in Nova City, and he was starting his run with that, and pretty high consequence, no mats, nothing like that. If something went wrong, then it kind of would have screwed up your whole line, really. And he chose to start with that. And what I thought was more interesting is that you stood up there with this massive smile on your face. You've never done this before. You started hyping the crowd up. You were jumping around like joyfully. You were clapping your hands. You were getting ready. You're getting everyone worked up. And then your body turned so that your back was to the gap. And suddenly the atmosphere, everyone was like, oh God, what is he going to do? Like, oh shit, no, please don't do that. And forgive me, but I suspect that not many people knew. I don't know, but I assume more people didn't know you than did know you in the room. Could be wrong. But this whole the crowd was just like, oh shit, what's about to happen? And then you executed it beautifully, and I just want to know about like. Usually when people are very scared, they are, they've got their game face on. I know I do. I'm like full concentration. I don't want anything to do with the crowd. I don't even want to look at anyone. And there you are, literally jumping for joy, about to do something that is pretty high consequence and pretty scary. So tell me a bit about that.
I mean, I really enjoy those situations, and speaking about cliff jumping, where we go cliff jumping, or where I usually go cliff jumping in Cyprus, it's kind of a tourist spot. So we get boats coming in, we get loads of tourists coming, and every time I'm there, I'm just like trying to get into the headspace, especially if I'm doing something new or pushing the envelope a little bit. And there's always these people there, and they're always saying, jump, jump. And I'm like, I'm not ready. I'm not going to jump just because you're saying jump. But because it happens so often, I'm like, okay, I need to capitalize on this. And I found that, especially when performing, but when working with fear especially, it's so important to have your level of arousal just right. If it's too high, your coordination goes down, you're thinking specifically too much about something or not enough about something else. If it's too low, then you're not going to work yourself up enough to do it. So I really found that it was a nice way to get out of my head, engage with the audience, get people there. And also I have this theory that, or I really love this quote that says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right. And I think your reputation is so important, because whether people think you can or can't also affects you,
Okay.
For whatever mechanism, whether it's because they think you can do it, that helps you think you can do it, or whatever it is. So if I can get everyone on the same page and they're like, oh, engaged and ready and like expecting something amazing, then it makes me think like, okay, now I can do this amazing thing, if that makes sense.
Do you feel like it's is it that kind of voluntary adding of pressure? Is that kind of what you're looking for? Like, as in, once you've hyped the crowd up, the expectation's higher. So does that kind of like lock you in?
Yes, I think in a sense, yeah. Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it only works if you know that you can do this thing. And so like I was quite confident that I could do it. But then just having a little boost from the crowd as well really helped. It's like external accountability. It's like, all right, I'm in it now, I have to go. And I know you mentioned the 3, 2, 1 send it, but I think this is a nice time to bring it up. But I'm always looking for different ways to get to this headspace where where magic happens, essentially. And yeah, I look at this 3, 2, 1 send it. It's kind of like neuro-linguistic programming. You're putting yourself, and it's kind of like athletes when they have their like a tennis player will bounce the ball 3 times, and it kind of gets you into that space.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the same way that 3, 2, 1 send it will go, the same way that having a crowd there and ready, it kind of makes it all just come to that key moment where you just surrender and let go and stop thinking and just go
for it. Yeah. Well, it's funny you mention, I've actually written that down in my notes about letting go, because I scrolled all the way down to your very, very first Instagram post, I think back in 2016 or something. And there's a clip of you being filmed. You're in some beautiful place, which is probably, I imagine, Cyprus.
Yeah.
And you look at the camera, and then you fall backwards from a high point into water, completely floppy in a big layout backflip. That's your first, as far as I can tell, that's your first post. And it got my mind thinking, because fear does tend to constrict, really. It tends to tighten us up. It tends to make us more, sturdy, a bit more kind of, I guess constricted. And often that's actually dangerous, because it will change our technique. If you'd have tried to throw yourself off backwards really, really tight and scared and, different body position, then you're probably going to hurt yourself. And I find it super interesting how sometimes it's the letting go that actually keeps you safer. And I'm sure people have felt this in parkour, where if you kind of hit something or jump in a certain way, or have to kind of relinquish some sort of intellectual control, then the magic kind of happens. And I had a good example. Where was it? Oh, it's gone. Okay, whilst it's coming back to me, just so I think, tell me a bit about that, about the kind of, where is this line between letting go and putting in lots of effort, I guess. And I think you've had some experiences with cliff diving as well, where you've had to kind of let go a bit during different movements as well. So whilst I try and remember my example, have your say on that bit,
Yeah. So I think part of it comes down to the arousal levels. Like you want the arousal level to be just right, and if you're too scared, you're going to be too constricted, and that's going to stop a lot of your. I kind of like to think you've got your brain, and then you've got your body, but your body has its own kind of brain as well. So what I try and do when I'm doing these things is like prepare with my brain and do whatever regressions or whatever preparations I need to do, or think whatever thoughts I need to do to get me into that space. But once that kind of clicks, and once like the jump looks easy, or once the jump just kind of feels right, then I just turn off my brain and I let the brain and my body do the work. And and it's kind of like, yeah, getting into the flow state when tennis players are playing, or when someone's skiing. Like, they're not thinking like, oh, there's this. It's just kind of like the brain is shut off and the body is just doing all the work. I think if you're tensing, if you're trying to think, oh, I need to tuck or twist now or something like that, then it's just too slow, you know. And the more you can just surrender and relax, the more your body just does it. Like, I think that's a big part of the process of overcoming fear, and it's learning to let go of control and trust that your body can do it, you know. Trust that you can do it in, like, in any kind of situation when it's fear, even if it's not physical. Trust that things are going to go well. And it's really hard to do because as we grow up, we've developed all these systems to help us control external factors. And a lot of times it helps, but a lot of times the level of control is it's not as high as we think. It's a bit of an illusion. So it's a really interesting and almost counterintuitive experience to develop a process of not controlling. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I noticed something really interesting about my jump that I did in the style finals, which has put me out for some time. I fractured my heels. I've watched the footage back lots and lots and lots of times, and something that is quite strange to me and relates to your talk about arousal. And by the way, guys, when we're talking about arousal, we're talking about a kind of level of nervous kind of stimulation. You know, if you're lying in bed, your sense of arousal is very again, wrong example. if you're lying on a deck chair, your sense of arousal is pretty low. Whereas if you're, you know, in an F1 car or something like that, then am I right in saying that? Have I got that right about the kind of the terms arousal in this sense?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like your stress. If you think about it, your stress response. You got the fight, flight, freeze, or I think a nice way to look at it is a performance arousal curve. So, I can't remember the parameters of it. I think it's performance and your level of arousal. So let's say on the x-axis is your level of arousal going across, and the y-axis is your performance. Yeah. As arousal increases, performance goes up. So you get a little bit nervous, and like this level of arousal helps you kind of focus and perform. And then it peaks. It's like a bell curve, and then as the arousal gets higher, your performance goes down, 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 down. Again.
Yeah. And something interesting that I really don't do, but it happened when I was about to jump. So my scariest bit of my style run was at the end, because I kind of wanted to have this finale, which was this big jump, which is kind of like, it's about 4 meters, pretty high. And
I think it's higher.
Yeah, I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it was pretty high. It felt amazing until it didn't. But yeah, so I do my run, and it's quite a long run. It's quite fast. So I noticed getting tired as I'm climbing up to do my final jump. Okay. And you can see I stumble a little bit trying to get up to the top, because I can feel I'm gassing out a little bit. And so I guess in a sense, my arousal level is falling, and I get up to the top, turn around, look at the jump, and I clap like that. And then I jump. I had no memory or intention of doing that, but you can see it on the footage. And I wonder whether that was a kind of in the moment subconscious, like, okay, you're gassing out, wake up, we've got something big to do, you know? And this is really interesting to me, because I wonder whether I was like subconsciously playing with this kind of arousal level, because I was adapting to kind of like shit, I need to do this massive thing. I need to like come back to the present, because I'm starting to think more about how tired I am. And I actually do think that my injury, fatigue, probably had a part to play, because my roll technique is pretty damn good. I didn't hurt my wrist, my shoulder, my elbow, nothing like that. Nothing which could have gone wrong. But the angle which my feet came into the ground was just maybe a bit tired. Maybe just like that tiredness just made me relax slightly too much just to go onto the heels. And so that's kind of my rough hypothesis. I also might just not be good enough. It might just not be experienced enough, which I've obviously thought about plenty as well. But it's just really interesting to me about this like clapping thing, because we often do it before something scary, and we do it after. We always clap after something good has happened.
Yeah, that's true. Even as like a spectator.
Yeah, for sure.
Naturally, you're like, you're just sitting there, but you have this like level of arousal, this excitement. It's like, oh, I need to express it.
Need to do something. Need to hit something. It's almost like you see people kind of like stomping their feet. Hitting themselves, like kind of like I don't know, hitting a wall, or just almost as if you need to do something physical that's very scary. That's coming very quickly. That's you're going to do very soon. Sorry. It's almost like you're not at that moment yet, so you need to do something physical to keep you kind of in reality. Otherwise, you're just in your mind thinking about what's going to happen next. It's almost like I need to touch something real just to kind of like get myself understanding of what's going to happen, I guess. I don't know. I just find that really curious. And I wonder if you had any other kind of little quirks or tips or things that you've noticed yourself doing, either before or after you've done something really scary.
Yeah, I mean, what you said makes a lot of sense. And I remember you even saying, I was listening to a podcast that you did on something about your shouting, and when you're doing a jump, you'll shout beforehand. And I found that really interesting. And I think it's the same thing, right? It's kind of, I mean, what I usually do if I'm on a cliff and I'm like, I need to build myself up, I'll like start slapping myself and shouting and slapping my quads, and it's kind of like telling your body, it's like, okay, you need to be ready, something's gonna happen now. This is it, you need to be prepared, get in the zone. Because like, especially if you're looking at a jump for a long time, let's say, it's hard to tell your body, okay, now it's going to happen now, So having something like bam, 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 wake up, okay, it's going to happen. You're kind of like preparing your body, like stomping your feet. It's like saying, prepare, get ready, this is going to happen. I think it's the same as the 3-2-1. It's like all these techniques that help you like get into that optimal arousal level and get you into that headspace where you can do that. So I think even now just talking about it, like my arousal has gone up a little bit. It's like
it's interesting, isn't it?
What's going on?
I have this really weird thing which I've spoken to Flynn Disney about. Actually, I don't think it's that weird. It's just something I've noticed that's very consistent. So I love arm jumps, and I often fantasize and visualize arm jumps a lot. Things that ones that I want to try and do, and I can feel it now. As soon as I start thinking about and visualizing arm jumps, particularly at height, I can feel what I can only describe as nervousness, coming into my hands.
Interesting.
And I notice it if I'm close to somewhere very high up as well. Like if I'm next to a huge drop or something, I quite specifically get like this electrical feeling going through my hands. And I can only really, I don't know, it must be that my body is like preparing the hands to grab on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
because I've
makes
done a
sense.
lot of arm jumps now, I wonder whether it's quite attuned that my hands are like getting ready to go, because I've done so many that it's kind of like, you've got to be ready, you've got to be there to catch. And it's just, it's so interesting. If I really like just go into my mind and think about an arm jump in depth, I get it every time. And it's,
Really
yeah, it's
amazing.
really, I wonder whether you've had that with trees, like, because I know you've done a lot of work in trees and at height, and I wonder whether you've had similar sensations in your body about like kind of, which are trying to ready you, or having nerves in your body.
I haven't had anything like that, to be honest. It's
Mm.
more just just getting into that headspace. I think a really nice way that I like to think about it, and this was kind of shared with me by Daniel Lillebacka, it's just getting into that headspace. And like the way he described it is, yeah, and I'm not sure exactly how he described it, this is how I interpreted it, but it's kind of like getting into this dimension where it all kind of makes sense. And like the whole process of getting into that jump, or whatever that difficult thing you're going to do, is, yeah, all you're thinking is what's taking you there. And when you, especially if you're dealing with fear, a lot of the times you'll be noticing the consequence, and you'll be looking like, oh, this is the worst case scenario. And it's just a battle between like letting these thoughts come up, noticing them, and then like letting them pass by, and then doing whatever you need to do to get into that kind of headspace. And yeah, I really like that kind of framework and that perspective, because like once, if you're like, okay, this is the goal, and you just focus on the jump and focus on the landing and focus on what that feels then you have all these positive emotions, positive associations, and you're like you with the cat leap inducing, you're visualizing it and you're doing it every time. I think that's so important. Like you need to be able to see yourself doing the jump. You need to be able to see yourself doing it well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of getting into that space. And if you can't, then you're not going to get into that space, you know. But yeah, in terms of like the neural excitation and the tingling, I don't get it anywhere specific. I think maybe because I don't do like one specific type of thing enough. But that's really interesting. It's something that I'm gonna pay attention to and see if it comes up. Yeah.
Yeah, when I told Finn about that, he in his kind of typical esoteric way, he said, it sounds like your body's call for adventure.
Oh, amazing.
And I
Yeah,
thought that
yeah.
was a nice way of putting it, because I guess I've really been pursuing arm jumps, and it's almost like the attention that comes to my hands is almost like maybe it is like a kind of call to doing more of that thing, is that part of my, in quotes, path, that's, it's quite interesting that he chose to kind of look at it quite poetically like that.
I love that perspective. I think that applies as well to like just any time you get like nervous or like you get like worked up, you think you can either look at it as like, oh, I'm really scared for this, or like maybe like me before the competition is like, oh, I'm really scared, I'm worried about it, or it's like, no, it's a call to adventure. Like this level of arousal, this excitation is like getting ready, and it's like a call to adventure. It's a call to action.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I was reading a bunch of your posts, and you've written about fear as I've heard it mentioned as kind of fear is kind of it represents a task in a way, a task to be kind of overcome. And you've written about this sort of thing, and I remember. Have you ever watched London Real with Brian Rose?
Yes. Yeah.
I think he was some of the first podcasts or like major kind of interviews that I used to listen to. I don't listen to it anymore, but I remember in one of them he was saying that he was interviewing someone and they were saying, go where the fear is. And that has really stuck with me, because that's just annoying. That's just like, no, like, I don't want to go there. I really don't want to go there.
That's a horrible place.
I really don't want to go there. Why do you want me to go there? That's the worst place. But in different aspects of my life, like even if it's through gritted teeth or like through clenched fists, it's like, go there, go there, see what's there. And it is awful, but usually there's some sort of incredible like learning from the other side.
Absolutely.
And you call yourself a phobonaut, which means that you are locked into this now. You've got no choice. So
yeah, that's my new identity. Yeah, I think that what you said is like go where the fear is so integral and so key to the whole work that I'm doing, and I think to the kind of path that I'm on. And it's so embedded throughout our culture and our history and mythology. It's just everywhere. And a really nice image or a way to kind of see this is through the story of the dragon and the knight, and the dragon protecting the gold. And they say the dragon was the creation, is the mythological creation of all of man's biggest fears combined in one.
Yeah, nice.
And so that way it kind of represents fear. It's a physical manifestation of fear. And usually the dragon is protecting its gold. It's got like a layer and it's got gold, and it's protecting its gold that it's stolen. And it's up to the knight to face the dragon. And you see it in like throughout history, like all time and time again. There's so many stories. I was watching a Disney film the other day called The Page Master.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That is one of my childhood classics. Oh, I love it so much. Carry on. Yeah, amazing film. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was not expecting you to say that. That's amazing. Not many people have seen that, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I hadn't seen it again since childhood. I had it downloaded.
Yeah.
But yeah, I watched it. It's so good. And essentially that's the story. It's like the kid is afraid, and like his dad like is building him a tree house, and then he's like, oh, I can't climb the tree house. Did you know that statistically 60% of household injuries land? And he's got all these like stats and figures, and like it's really nice because that kind of represents the idea of the mind trying to build control. And then dad's like, oh, it's okay, whatever. And then he asks him to go and pick up some nails, and he goes from the hardware store, and then he gets trapped in a storm, and he ends up in a library. And yeah, in the library he kind of falls over, he hits his head, and he goes into this cartoon world, and that is all about his journey to develop courage. And he meets these three books. There's adventure, fantasy, and horror, and they go on all these adventures. They defeat Mr. Hyde, and it kind of all culminates with this big dragon. Like they're making their way towards the exit, and there's this big dragon, and it's crazy because it's that story again. And it's like he has to build the courage, and he has to go against all odds. You know, it feels like there's this really nice quote that says, "Fear is a mile wide and an inch thick." So it's like it feels like it's so scary, and like fear is a huge thing, and like if you go, it's like kind of like against all odds. But when you do go to it, there'll be some resistance, but you just kind of go through it, and like that's what happens. Like he goes and he gets eaten by the dragon, but then he makes his way out and he survives, and you know, lives happily ever after, you know.
Spoilers.
And I think, yeah.
No, it's a kid's film. You know what's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, I find that so many times, like when you overcome fear, it's like, bam, reward, you know. It's like, oh, that was a scary thing, but like I feel so much better, and so much of it's great because it works on your self-image, you know. It's like, oh, I did this scary thing, and I survived, and I didn't think I would, and like or you know, like in any kind of fear, like fear of rejection, like, oh, I can't talk to this person because they're gonna say I'm gonna say something dumb, or they're gonna think la la la, and then you do it and it's like, oh, that went really well, you know. And it's only rewarding because there is that risk. I think a lot of times people are put off. It's like, yeah, but you're putting yourself at risk, you're putting your life at risk, or you're risking this, and that's true, but like it wouldn't be a reward, it wouldn't be courageous if you weren't being vulnerable, you know. If there wasn't that risk, you have to. And I think there's a line between stupidity and courageous, and it's very thin. And so a lot of times things that are courageous can be considered stupid, and things like some behaviors can be stupid if you're not prepared, if you're not ready for it, if it's not in your scope. But again, it's like that's why it's rewarding, you know, because there's that risk, because things can go wrong, because you can get hurt. But if you don't do that, then it's hard to find growth.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? That the dragon it's not just there; it's guarding treasure. It's guarding something of value, and that so many times in life, some of the most rewarding things have been on the other side of fear. I love that quote. I've never heard that before. A mile wide and an inch thick, because that's.
Yes.
I'm going to use that with my students now, because that's something. It plays out every day, all over the world, in parkour. You know, oh, it was actually fine. You know, people say that all the time. Oh, it's easy. Actually, you got it, man. Like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And you've just made it out to be this huge dragon in your mind.
Yes.
That's happened countless times with me, and it's just so fascinating that it keeps happening because you think you'd learn, like, oh well, that last challenge didn't seem so bad once I'd done it, so why am I scared again for this one? But that's the nature of fear. That's the nature of the dragons. I guess they're very conniving. Yeah. But on that note, and you can go into this in any way you want, really, in as much kind of vulnerability or not. What are some of the biggest fears that you've experienced in your life, parkour or not, and how have you faced them, or how have they restricted you in your life?
That's a good question. It's interesting now. It's kind of changed, and I have less clarity over it. But growing up and like historically, it was always interpersonal fears, and I think it still is interpersonal fears. Like anything physical, like I'm still going to be scared when it's at my level, but I'm more familiar with it. But yeah, for me, it's always interpersonal fears. It's like being in a group and expressing myself, or just being authentically me, I think is something that I would struggle with a lot for whatever reason. But yeah, since being on this path, it's been really interesting because I've been able to work on it a lot, and I've still got a long way to go. I've still got a lot of work to do, but I'm using everything that I've learned through the physical overcoming of fears and applying it to the interpersonal. And I mean, what I've discovered is it kind of boils down to two areas, to two things. It's graded exposure, and it's the second one. I can't really put like one word to it, but it's kind of like your mindset, you know. It's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's kind of like just questioning your beliefs. So that's something that I've been working on a lot. I've been doing the 30 days of talking to strangers.
Oh, really?
Which is, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What day are you on now? Have you finished that, or is that
I've
ongoing?
finished it. Yeah.
Okay.
I wish I did like 100 days of talking to strangers because
Right.
it was
Okay.
so valuable. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, I did the 30 days, and now that I don't have the challenge to keep me accountable, I'm not doing it as much. But
Okay.
I'm still continuing it. But yeah, I learned so much from that experience. And
Interesting. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good one, man. That's something very, very accessible to anyone, and
Yes.
I think we can all agree that talking with strangers, especially in this, I don't know, I kind of feel it in this climate. It's
Mm,
not super. It's not super fluid. It's not super easy. There's a little bit of tension there, and
definitely.
maybe more than there used to be. But
Mm,
that's really cool. Yeah, that you did that. That's a great one. Especially if you've obviously identified that interpersonal stuff is something that is a dragon for you, and then you've had a go at a kind of a manageable challenge like that. That's really cool.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like that one, I was like, I used, the graded exposure technique a lot. So I kind of said, as a minimum, you have to talk to someone and say like, what's the time? My phone's out of battery. What's the time? So it's like the point of access is really easy. And then I didn't have as a maximum, but that way it's like, okay, I know that every single day I can do it, and the days that I'm finding it harder, I can just do that, and the days that I'm finding it easier, I can expand upon it and do a lot more. And I ended up, I mean, it changed my commute to work from just being like head in a book or on my phone to just having some amazing conversations with strangers, which was incredible.
That's great, man. That's really great. I think that should. Well, I just see the world better in that way. If people were, I mean, yes, there's definitely a case for privacy and kind of time to yourself, and especially if you're doing the same thing every day, maybe you just want to kind of just get through it, really. Maybe you just want to have this time where you're locked into some music that you love, or a podcast, and you don't really want to talk with anyone. I get that completely, but I do think it's completely unbalanced, and that we're not really talking with each other very well. I don't think we're very good at talking to each other. I find the jokes which are a little bit on the nose from like. Do you follow the We Are Flumping page? The parkour. Oh, okay. It's probably the number one like shit posting meme parkour
Okay,
page, and
nice.
I think it's Joshua Cavalier from America who runs it, and he's just pumping out so many parkour memes, and they are the best. They are so funny.
Okay.
And one of them is like a clip from Skyrim or something, and it's like two NPCs trying to have a conversation, like, "Hello, how are you today? I'm doing fine." And the caption is, how two people talk at a parkour jam about anything but parkour, when they're trying to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think that, and I'm not having a dig at parkour people, because I think that it relates to many different groups of people. But I think that I noticed recently that I have stronger relationships with people in parkour who I can speak to at least one other topic about. So whether that's like music, or maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's cliff diving, or maybe it's photography, or in the case of like Tom Redfern, maybe it's Pokemon. He loves Pokemon. I don't play Pokemon, but I remember I used to play Pokemon, so we joke about that, and it's just funny, it's just nice. So I find having just something else apart from just the obvious is actually quite a good way of breaking some of the ice with people. But you must have had some interesting interactions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I had those people who were just wanted to keep to themselves, and
Yeah.
but I think I didn't have too many. Everyone was kind of just very polite and stuff like that.
Mm.
But then a lot of people, I would tell them that I'm doing the challenge, and they.
So you would tell them.
Like,
You would tell
amazing.
them.
Yes, yeah. So I tell them, because that was like in terms of the grading, like that actually helped a lot. Because once I said that, they'd be like, "Oh, okay." And I think a lot of interacting with strangers, especially different people on the tube, is like, "What is going on? Why is this person talking to me?"
Yeah.
So if you explain like, "Oh, I'm doing this challenge," and you express some vulnerabilities, like, "Oh, I have some social anxiety, and I'm doing this challenge where I'm trying to do this," they're like, "Oh, amazing," and they're like, "Oh," and they want to do you a favor, and they're like, "Oh yeah, amazing." And I also have social anxiety, because it seems like most people have social anxiety to some level or another. And yeah, and then you kind of, there's that connection. I think it's really interesting, yeah, the way we connect. I think you don't need, but having some vulnerability and being able to share vulnerability helps you connect, because it's kind of like, this is my weakness and I'm trusting you, and yeah, I'm sharing with you, and that if someone does that to you, it's like, oh, of course, yeah, let me help you out, and maybe they'll reciprocate, like, oh, I have this vulnerability because you trust me, I trust you, and you know, it's quite interesting. Yeah.
And so, from a teaching perspective, of which I know that you're involved in, you do workshops and kind of fear courses, and I know you've taught parkour for a long time as well. How have you managed that then? Because, you know, coaching is being the sort of the leader of the conversation. You are the orator of the, you know, you're the atmosphere maker. You're the orator. You're the talker. So how have you found that? How have you found coaching? I don't know, maybe it's different with kids and adults. I certainly think there's a big difference there in terms of how I feel. I'm actually way more afraid of teaching adults or people with half a brain, because then I've got to like switch on, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about how your experience with teaching is.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Coaching kids is fine. Coaching adults is a different thing. Maybe I can talk a little bit about how I got into it as well. Like,
sure.
Especially with the whole fear stuff, I had no intention of doing, like, it wasn't on my radar. And then with the cliff jumping, Flynn Disney invited me to a workshop, and he said, I want you to lead a segment on fear and cliff jumping. And I was like, I have no idea. I've never done that before. But yes, let's do it. I'm excited. So I kind of prepared for that. It kind of fell through, but I decided, because I'd prepared just to do the workshop, and doing the workshop, and like I said briefly before, like, one of my fears is like speaking in groups and being the center of attention and being the orator and things like that. So that's definitely not something that I find natural to do. But again, it's just through exposure, it's become more and more doable. And yeah, I think, again, the way I started is it was very much, here's a topic and now you guys discuss it. And I was, again, like, doing what I naturally do, and like what a lot of common response to fear is aversion and avoidance. It's like, here you go, put it here, put the intention here. And the more I do it, the more I feel comfortable, holding the spotlight and sharing, and like being like, this is the experience, this is what we're doing. And still not 100% comfortable, confident with that, but definitely a lot more so. And I think, and that it really highlights the point that like you can do anything that you're afraid of if you just put enough time and energy there. You know, like that's my attitude now. Like if someone says do this, it's like yeah, I'll do that, because it's like you can anything you can do it. You can, if you just put enough time, energy, get enough exposure, get the exposure at the right dose, and just build your way up to it. It's just like no problem. You know? I think a lot of time, yeah.
So carry on. Yeah, carry on.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of times people like are a little bit rigid in their identity, and they're like, oh yeah, this is not me. You know, I'm not this person. You know, like I'm not someone who does that. But it's like, do you want to be? Like, is that something that you would enjoy? If not, then fair enough. If it is, then you can be that if you want to. You know. And you just need to take the steps towards that.
For sure. I mean, this is what was so, and I've mentioned this to people already, but this was something that was so powerful to me about doing my first style run maybe 2 years ago. It was completely it was like an attack on my identity. It was like it was a real, because I've always thought of myself, I've made this narrative that I'm like the parkour guy. I don't really do flips. I'm not a style athlete. Like, why would I even bother? Like, it's not me. And I don't quite know how I convinced myself to do it. I think it was that kind of, maybe that little call to adventure, you know, that phrase, you know, maybe what happens if I do put my name down? What will happen? And then once I put it down, I'm like, oh shit, I've committed now. I've got to do it now. And it was one of the kind of worst and best experiences of my life. Like, I hated that I was standing there with 200 people watching me. I hate being watched doing parkour generally, and I did my run and finished my run and just had this like, it was like this huge, it was like kind of breaking the mirror. It was like, oh my god, you can do that. And not only that, is that I did quite well. I got through to the final, and then that's subsequently. Now, I've done style every time, and I've got to the final each year, and it's just like it's blown apart the narrative, and that keeps me coming back to it, because I'm like, this is very fertile ground here for like learning. And now I've had a big one. I've really hurt myself, and that's like an even bigger opportunity for learning and from this area, and. Yeah, so I kind of, because you mentioned this in your caption as well when you're talking about the project Underground Competition. You were saying you were speaking with different people around the event, and a lot of them would like to compete, would like to give it a try, but they don't feel like it's them, or they don't feel like they're good enough, Yeah. And just the fear holding them back from even having a go. I had a weird moment, and I won't name who it was, but oh shit. So I had to wait for ages for my style finals run. I was quite near the back, and there was a chap that was going to go before me, and he was really, really nervous. He was, maybe it was the first run. He was super nervous and stuff, and I was trying to bring him round to doing his run, and he just pulled out at the last second. And so I'm like thinking I've got like a few more minutes to prepare, and suddenly they're like, okay, it's Sam Kopak now. And I'm like, oh my god, you just pulled out right in front of my eyes. Why did you do that? But then, I can't blame him. He's, he was scared, and he didn't feel like it was right. And yeah, tell me a bit about that, about your kind of conversations with some people throughout the event who were curious but didn't feel like they could do it.
Yeah. So much of that is just fear of failure, right? Or fear of rejection, and fear of like they're looking bad and being like this. And I think a big part of your identity is like, oh, this is my identity, this is what I know, this is what's safe, and this is where I'm going to stay. And that kind of reduces your level of agency. And so you end up having a life that's not that big, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I think there's this really nice quote that kind of summarizes it. It's like it's life shrinks or expands in proportion to your courage. And so the more courage you have, the more you step outside your comfort zone, the more your comfort zone expands, the more new experiences that you have, you know. And like for me, especially like the older I get, you know, when I was younger, I was imagining like, oh, when I'm older, I'll do this and I'll have this sort of life. And you kind of don't realize that you need to play an active role in that. If you're just kind of just going with the flow, just doing like what feels natural to you, and doing like, you look at your past to determine your future. If you do that, then you're never going to have anything different in your future. And I experience it all the time. I think everyone does. It's so natural, but I think a lot of people aren't so aware of it. But it's just, you have your identity, and you don't try these new things. And maybe even there's that perfectionism element, you know. It's like, if I do this new thing, I have to be great at it, you know. And it's like, who do you think you are to think like you're going to be great at something that you've never tried before? You know, like, yeah, exactly, like that. Where did you get that notion in your head? You know, like kids who get so fantastic at whatever it is they kind of do, they don't have these expectations of themselves. They're like, I'm going to try this new thing, and I'm not going to be good at it, because like, of course, everything for them, like everything is new, right? Then as you get older, you get good at certain things, and you get validation from being good at it. So then you just want to stick with that, and you don't want to try other things. I think you just expect yourself to be good at something. There's this, I love, you're probably noticing, but I have all these quotes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But a really nice one is, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Which is really, I love that. You do. Yeah, if you get good at failing, if you get good at being bad, if you have the beginner's mind, and you're comfortable losing and failing and getting hurt, that's a superpower, you know. You're going to be so good at whatever in life, you know. But if you've got that fear that doesn't even let you start, doesn't even let you try, then it's a huge barrier. It's a huge barrier in your life. Yeah,
I think you're right. Just quickly going back to, you mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, just briefly before, and I've looked into this a little bit, and been on the receiving end of that kind of therapy. And what I love is this kind of evidence-based approach. It's very, I think particularly for pragmatic types, it's very, very useful, because like you say, when you mess up, it's very, very easy to think, well, I'll always mess up.
Yes.
But what we don't think about is that when you succeed, you certify evidence that you succeeded. And it's just like, hang on a minute. Last time I did this, I was absolutely fine. Nothing went wrong. I have evidence. I have literal evidence that went well. So a funny one for me is that I have done in my work, I've done many, many holiday camps. Okay, so with kids, where they come for the day. It's kind of half teaching, half child minding sort of thing. Yeah. And they have fun. We play games. We do all sorts of drills and things. And it's funny that I've done so many, and yet pretty much every single time the night before, I'm like, okay, right. I'm feeling a little bit not nervous, but just a bit like apprehensive. And it doesn't really make much sense, because the evidence bank is so big that why would I not trust that? Why would I not trust that the probability is very high that it's going to go well, you know?
I've done it before, yeah.
Yeah, and so I love that this kind of switch of perspective that I think CBT encourages. Is like, you know, what's the evidence for your mindset? Well, what is the
Yeah,
evidence? What
100%.
is the evidence for that? And that can go a long way in anxiety as well, particularly
Yes.
When we make assumptions or projections about what people think. It's kind of like, what's the actual evidence for that? Where,
yeah,
you know, does so and so actually think that about you, or have you just projected that in your mind? Like, there is no evidence for it. You've just made it up, and now you're just having this imaginary argument with them in your mind. You know, like it doesn't exist in reality. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's so true.
yeah,
It's so good to look at the evidence, and I think you kind of do that all the time, like with people you're interacting. You with, like, you're not interacting with a person, you're interacting with your idea of them. You know,
like we are now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. But yeah, just building the evidence is good. Yeah. I think in terms of like overcoming a fear, a lot of the times it's important to do a risk-reward analysis. So it's like, what's the risk? What's the reward? And a lot of the time the risk is really obvious. Like, oh, I can get hurt in this X, Y, Z ways.
Yeah.
And the reward is sometimes less obvious. You know, it's like, especially with physical stuff or with any kind of thing, it's just like, oh, let's say a jump between a gap. It's like the reward for doing that is like, yeah, I'm gonna feel good and like I overcame that, but like, what am I actually getting out of that? You know, is it worth putting my life at risk, or worth like getting significantly injured? But
yeah,
a nice way to look at it is to zoom out and to see that each time you do this, you're creating evidence, and you're creating evidence that you can do this thing.
Yes.
Which is a really nice thing. So it's not just about that jump, it's about your life moving forward. It's like, oh, I've done this scary thing, I've done this scary thing, I've done this scary thing. And like, even though that evidence, like you're saying, like with the camps, like you've got the evidence but you're still apprehensive, it's better that you have that evidence than you don't, right? So you're just making it easier for yourself in the future.
And it sort of, for me, it revolves around that word of faith, right? It's kind of like that, or belief, you know? It's very, I think these words are very, very sort of ephemeral. They're very hard to, what am I trying to say? They don't often feel very tangible, you know. Belief, it's like self-belief or faith, you know. Because what is that really? I don't really know what that is, but I think it can relate to what we're talking about here. About, okay, so I've done this thing 100 times. Well, that gives me decent ground to have faith that I will do it again, just as well. I wonder whether you felt that with your back layout pre.
Yeah.
Whether you've done so many before, whether it's into water or onto to concrete, you've done so many before that like you had that belief in yourself and kind of trusting the body to do what it's already done before.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. I think the more you do stuff like that, the more it applies to that situation. It's like, yeah, I've done a backflip from here before, I've done this. But then the more you do it in different areas, the more you kind of have faith in yourself doing anything, you know? And I think a lot of it comes down to your intuition. Like, you see something and like, yes, I can do that, no, I can't. And the more you do stuff like that, if you see it and you're like, yeah, I can do it, then you can trust that. You can have faith in that feeling of, yes, I can do it more. you know.
Well, you touched on something very interesting there, which I think is really important, and you can maybe help me out on this one. Is variation, because it's not just, you don't get over a backflip fear by just doing a backflip on the floor, right? Like maybe trying lots of different types of backflips, or from different heights, or from different obstacles, or different amounts of mats, or with different amounts of spotting, or all of these things. Maybe actually this is how the jigsaw comes together, rather than just doing the strict one thing. And maybe this is where people can push through some plateaus with certain movements. It's like, maybe it's not just about doing that movement. Maybe you should try species of that movement in lots of different ways, right?
Yeah.
To give you a better, a kind of higher resolution picture of how to do it in your body, in your kind of psychosomatic being. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you see so many people who like get really good at doing a skill, and then they're like, oh, okay, now I have to do it in this. They do it in like one place, like they'll do it onto crash mats, and they're like, got the double backflip, let's say, onto a crash mat, and they're like, oh yeah, I could do that 10 out of 10 times. But then like, it's like learning it again if they have to do it on a smaller crash mat or without a crash mat, or so. Yeah, just variety is so good. Just being able to do it in loads of different situations, because every situation is going to be different, and like even if you come back to the same place and do the same jump, you're a different person. So and your mindset's going to be different. So yeah, just being curious and taking it into lots of different places is going to really help, because then it's like, it's not like, oh, I did it here with this at this height or with these parameters. It's like, oh, I did it here and 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 I did it here, so I can do it in this new place, you know.
And this really tracks with you, because I've as I said, combed through all your Instagram clips, and it's not just that you've done parkour for a long time. You've done a lot of cliff diving. You've also done a lot of indoor parkour work, which is which you can change. What's the word? Not malleable. Modular. You can change things around. And not only that, but you've done a lot of work on trampolines and trampoline parks and airbags, and so it makes sense that you've kind of brought movements into focus, because you've exposed yourself to a variety of different ways of doing them, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The more, I think anyone who just does one sport, they're going to get really good at it, but I think it's always good to do it in different ways, especially for the health of your body and the health of your mind. Variety is so good, if you're just doing the same movement again and again and again and again, you're going to get worn out. There's this no, I won't mention that because I don't know enough about it. But essentially, I think it's really, really good. I mean, like, because I work as a sport rehabilitator as well, so I see lots of people in the clinic, and just from a health perspective, people who have one sport, like maybe rock climbing, or football, or something like that, are going to get a lot more injuries than people who have different sports and who do different things, which is pretty cool. And I think parkour is great because it's so varied in the movement. It's kind of like a general physical preparedness. You got running, jumping, climbing.
Yeah.
So I think you can get away with just doing parkour, but then at the same time, you would benefit. You see the people who, in terms of like creativity, are the ones who have it, who do different sports and who do different things as well.
So we have talked all about fear today. We've mentioned a bunch of different things. We're going to zoom in, we're going to focus, we're going to lock into the most crucial aspect of this podcast, which is parkour coaching. This is why I'm making this, to help coaches do their thing, to hear from different people. So we're going to look at coaching specifically, and this is quite difficult to do just through talking because we can't demonstrate or show anything. But I've got a couple of topics that I would like to discuss regarding fear in parkour practice and coaching. So the first one is heights. And this is a very, very common fear for most people. But I wanted to ask you about how you've implemented heights within your coaching, and what has helped people. What has helped people who maybe have a particular fear of heights, or an aversion to heights, perhaps. I know you've done work with trees, and they are often great tools for height practice, just because they go up in increments. So tell us a bit about this if you can, and
with heights, it's quite interesting. I think again it's like going up in increments. It's about graded exposure, and I think so much, kind of like I was talking about before, like how you can do anything if you put enough time, energy and effort. A big way of overcoming the fear of heights is just through habituation. So just being in that position again and again and again. So a lot of times, like, I'll see people who had a fear of heights and then they didn't have a fear of heights, and I say, how did you get over it? It's like, and they just say, because I was doing this activity, this behavior. Usually it's something, what I come across the most is bouldering or rock climbing. People start off and by the time they're like reaching the top, they're kind of shaking so much, and then they touch it, and then they quickly scamper down, and then they just do it again and again and again and again and again. And through that process of repetition, I think there's quite a few mechanisms that work, that are at play. And one is creating the evidence, building evidence, and two is you're just being in that position again and again and again, and intellectually a lot of times you might be safe, but you're still scared. But what stops you from being scared is when your body knows that you're safe. And your body will know that you're safe when you're in that position for an extended period, and you're still okay, So it's kind of like driving a car. When you first start driving a car, lots of arousal, and you're aware you're driving a 2-ton piece of metal, and lots of things can go wrong. And the more you do it, the more you habituate, the more your body's like, okay, I don't need to be scared in this situation because I've been here before and it's all good. And what I do need to be scared of is this, A lot of times we've got this thing called fear generalization, where let's say if you're at height, you're just like, I'm aware of the drop and now everything is scary. And the more you're in that position, the more you can distinguish between what you should be afraid of, what is an actual threat, because your body wants to get into a space of homeostasis. It wants to self-regulate. So it can't be stressed all the time, because that's very energy demanding. So it needs to be like, okay, let's calm down and save this stress response for when we need it. So just graded exposure, to put it simply. Just go there, build it, and get used to it.
Yeah, so at Nova City, we've obviously got some high blocks, and with the children, it's often a case of curiosity, but also quite a lot of fear. And something that I have decided to focus on, and something that really can't be understated with Well, yeah, with parkour is the competence to
Mm-hmm.
get down, right? So people are
Mm-hmm.
often very scared of ledges because they don't know
Mm.
how to get down. They just haven't
Mm.
learned how to go onto their belly, kind of bring their hands
Mm.
to the edge, go to a
Mm-hmm.
full extension hang, look over their
Mm-hmm.
shoulder, look, spot the ground, drop, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, especially with Nova City, with lots of different levels and heights and things, this is something I've been working on
Mm.
quite a lot, and it's great to see when it clicks for children, or to be honest, for older kids as well, when
Mm.
they realize, oh, well, now Sam doesn't have to help me down every single time. I'm not super
Mm.
scared. I have agency.
Mm.
I can
Mm.
actually dictate what I can go up and go down. And it's such a, I mean, I think that I want to learn more actually about the different ways of getting down, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes kids are actually so scared that they'll completely freeze and they just won't even let me help them down at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a small thing that's helped me is imagine imagine a kid who is white in the face, like kind of chest over the ledge and trying to
Mm-hmm.
get down. Something that I help them with is obviously is the feet. The feet are suspended; they're not in contact with anything. So just
Mm-hmm.
adding that sensory input of
Mm.
touching the feet, holding the feet, or just tapping the feet, it
Mm.
it really helps because and it sounds obvious, but it really helps just because it's familiar. It feels like the ground again,
Mm.
right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And this is something I found with backflip spotting as well. As they get closer to being able to do it without any assistance,
Mm-hmm.
just a tap on. If I've
Mm.
been spotting them heavily using
Yes.
kind of the scruff of their back and the underside of their legs, like if I've been doing this spotting technique over and over again, and they've been gaining confidence from that, as
Mm.
they progress towards autonomy with the movement, just
Mm.
some light taps on the back saying, I'm here, I'm here.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That sensory input, that kind of giving them safety, I found
Yeah.
that's worked quite well before they go to completely by themselves. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a hugely powerful thing. It's just giving people that reassurance, right? Giving them like, you're safe, you're safe, you can do it,
yeah.
And a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't. A lot of what brings fear is uncertainty, right? So it's like, I don't know if I can do this, and if someone else who's the expert, who's more experienced than you, are there and they're like, I know you, I know what you can do, I know this
Mm-hmm.
task, you can do it. That's so powerful. And that could be like through like, yeah, just gentle spotting, just through reassurance, through words. For me, if someone's doing that to me, then it's kind of like, it's that thing that I need to push me to do it. It's like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's more data. You're always looking for data. Like what kind of
Mm-hmm.
data is there? What evidence is there to show that I can do this? And yeah, that's a big part of it. It's just having someone who's the expert there, guide you, and help you do it. And sometimes, yeah, but you need that level of trust with that person, right? You need
You
that
do.
rapport. Yeah,
So
it's easier.
important.
Yeah, easier if you've got that relationship already.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah. Something that I've found difficult getting older, but also being a very, very tall, long boy,
Mm.
is that it takes a certain person to be able to spot me, or
Mm.
two people, right? And
Mhm.
that's quite expensive. So like,
Mhm.
they might be busy, and if I say, oh, I need two people to help me with this, they're like, oh, well, okay, like, yeah, I'll help. But also being a big guy, I need
Mm.
big people to help me round for flips, especially. So
Yeah.
um, I have been thoroughly my self-narrative of tall people can't do flips very well has been destroyed by Liam Norbury. Props to him, because he is a pretty tall guy, and he is very good at flips and very competent with them. And so that's gone out the window. So I can't use that as an excuse. But one thing that I guess would have helped me in my learning curve with parkour, and especially with rotations and flips, is having a spotter who's big and capable, and they're often few and far between. So whenever they do come to the gym, I'm like, oh, do you mind just helping me with this or something? But Tom
would be great.
Tom Redfern.
Yeah,
of course. He was what I had in mind anyway. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Shout out to Tom. I know he's listening to this. He always listens to these in the car. So shout out to Tom. So let's look into that a little bit, actually, because you have delved into a lot of different flips, rotations, and doubles. Double, whether it's double Kong or double backflip or double front or double side. And you've done double side plenty of times. Where that for me is very unfamiliar, actually. So can you tell me a bit about your process and what's helped you with fear with doubles?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I still I love doubles, and I've got the awareness for them. I haven't taken so many of them onto hard ground yet.
Sure.
But yeah, I think doubles are tough, right? Because there's not so much spotting. You're jumping, you're tucking, and it's really just getting familiar with the sensation. It's like, it's like, oh, that's that, and then okay, it feels like a good time to open, and then you just open.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think in terms of learning them, you really need to just start with a tuck and pray kind of mentality. Find a foam pit, find somewhere soft, and find water, and then just be but it's tough. I'm just thinking now, probably one of the hardest flips I've done would be a triple, and I did that cliff jumping.
Wow.
And that was
triple backflip. Are we talking about?
It was not. That's on my list, but it was a front flip to Barani, so a front flip and a half twist, and then to a backflip.
Yeah, that's a lot going on for a short amount of time.
It's a lot, exactly, and it was off an 18-meter cliff. So the consequence, if I backflop that, it was quite high.
That's serious. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah. Damn.
Yeah. So the way I broke that down was I just did two. So I did the front to the front and a half, and then I did the front half, the Barani, to the back, and I got quite comfortable with those. And then I think visualization is such a powerful tool, because I think that's kind of what got me through it. And it's just visualizing it again and again and again and again and again and again, and feeling that sensation again and again, so that when it comes to actually doing it, it's I kind of tell myself, oh, I'm doing it again, It's kind of when you learn a flip, or when you're doing something new, I always just say, I've done it already, and this is easy.
Yeah.
Because I just
that's incredibly. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say I project myself into the future, where I know that at some point I'm going to feel like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's easy. So I just trying to put myself in that mindset, and that really helps.
It is crazy, and I don't know what the correct scientific or psychological term for it, but let's take a step back for a second. It is crazy the difference between not being able to do something and then having one rep behind you, right? It's crazy. You see it time and time again with people in parkour. They have done a jump or done a flip, and you can literally see even their body language is different. It's like, oh, I've just done it, so I can do it again. But what actually is going on there, like, is so interesting to me, like from a psychological perspective, or maybe, and this is not my ballpark, but maybe a neurological perspective. It's like, why is there such a big change? You've only done like one or two repetitions, and suddenly the confidence has manifested itself, right? And you really, it's such a, not crutch, that's the wrong word, what am I thinking of? It's such a support to you could have done a jump 5 years ago in a city that you have visited a few times, and you go back and you remember, oh yeah, I did that one. Yeah, okay. How am I feeling today? Oh, I'm feeling good. Yeah. Yeah. Let's give it another try. Rather than being like, oh, that looks pretty daunting. Not sure about that. Like, I'm feeling fear in myself. It's so interesting to me. I find that fascinating.
Yeah. I think so much of it comes down to like to the unknown, right? If you've done it once, you're like, oh, okay. The amount of unknown just reduces so drastically.
Yeah.
The uncertainty goes down. It's like, oh, I can do that, or And I think that's where visualization comes in as well, because it's like the more you can visualize. And so I don't know how you feel, but like, do you ever have a jump where you're like, I can't see that. I can't visualize it.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. What do I have? I'll tell you what a good example of that is. And quite simply, it just translates to me not doing very many, I guess. But also, I don't really enjoy them. But one that I find difficult to visualize, which some people can do quite easily, is rail to rail level kongs. Or cat pass, or whatever you want to say. Like, to me, they can often seem quite like, how the hell am I going to pull on that first rail, stay high enough, and hit the second rail safely? Like that, to me, I remember a while ago. This is reaching back, but I remember at one of the For the Love of Movement gatherings, and Pedro Salgado was like really in his prime at that time, and was kind of one of the biggest names there. And I remember him doing this rail to rail Kong Pri that was like, it was huge, and it was one of those, like, those quite low down, maybe like I don't know, not sternum height. Yeah, maybe it was like sternum height kind of scaffold builds that people have, kind of like rectangular, that people have a lot in parkour parks and stuff. It was like that, and he was repping it. He was just bouncing it. I was like, damn, that's good. That is, because it's so precise. It's so, and he's putting in so much power. And for me, looking at that, I'm just like, nah, it's not for me. Another example is who isn't me, and again, we've already mentioned him once, Tom Redfern. He had an interesting experience with Manpower, because he went there and he had, I guess, full intention of completing it and doing it, and as to use his phrase, he couldn't push the button. He couldn't, and it wasn't necessarily because of having so much fear. It was, he couldn't visualize it. He couldn't see how the body is going to translate through time and space from this point to that point. He couldn't, and I found that really, really interesting. There's certainly things that I don't understand gainers very well at all. I've only done gainers on trampolines. I can't bring myself to shove my hips forward but also rotate over my head whilst moving forwards. Like to me, it's too, it's very, very difficult for me to understand.
And it's incredible, like how
but that's something you're very comfortable with. I've seen you do lots of gainers. It's something that you're really like.
Yeah. For me, a gainer is like, boom, I know it, and like I can visualize it, and it's like, it's just this, and like, you see like people doing parkour, like when they're visualizing, they're like doing like small movements, and it's
Yeah.
like this.
Like
this,
you're
this.
doing it right now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, but yeah, if you don't have that kind of connection, if you don't know like what muscles to tense, and then I think it's not possible to visualize it, right? Like this, because you don't know like how it's going to feel. It's so interesting, like the connection between like doing the thing and visualizing the thing. It's so strong.
For sure.
Yeah.
I wonder whether. Oh, sorry, Karen.
I'm just thinking like something like a gainer, like how to. What kind of preps you can do to kind of get that visualization, you know? So like I think a fantastic thing would be like jumping forward, tucking and landing on your back on like a crash mat, you know? And doing that, and then like I think at some point if you do that enough, then, or like even doing like facing sideways, so you're perpendicular to the takeoff, and then you're doing a gainer forward but to the side a little bit, so that you're not worried about clipping or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things will help get the visualization, and then once you can visualize it, then you just need to push the button.
Yeah, I remember I wonder if he's listening. I remember my good friend Jack Holland Bartlett. He came to my village, and he was prepping a gainer off this tiny bridge in my village, and just onto grass. But you know, he'd not done too many, and he was just really casually just doing gainers on flats on the floor to prep for going off something. And in my mind, that's almost worse. I'm like, God, like doing it on flat, you know. But he just had it locked in to change his technique, push his hips forward and high towards the sky, and just do a backflip, and he'd go forward. He'd trust that he'd go forward, and then he completed it after doing those preps on the floor. He then did it off the bridge and did it comfortably, did it really easily. Something I would love to be able to do. Yeah, I guess just to kind of close on this point, there's definitely something to be said about airtime, right? Because like with trampolines or foam pits or airbags, you are given airtime to play with. So then you can manipulate yourself, not in that really intense space of fraction of a second when you're doing them. And I think that's something we can think about as well. It's like, of course, people are going to be scared about doing flips because it all has to happen within such a short space of time. You know, there's there's very little time for thinking, and I almost think about it like in martial arts, like striking someone has to be like rapid. It has to be there. You know, you got to move quickly. You got to do something quickly, and I kind of see flips similar thing. It's like a bang, snap, land. You know. I know you've used trampolines and foam pits and stuff a lot, so I guess this is part of your kind of graded progression is playing with all this. But let's move on to the next thing in coaching which I had, which is commitment. And the old joke, we all have commitment issues in parkour, and maybe we shouldn't speak too much on that. Who knows where that conversation will go, but commitment seems to be another really, really common psychological aspect of parkour. You know, you see people trying to make them do something, trying to commit to something, or willing themselves, or hyping themselves, or calming themselves, or asking someone else for help, or being in this quite uncomfortable position where we're about to do something but we can't commit to doing something. So I wonder if you can think of an experience where you've helped coach someone out of that, or whether you can think about something in yourself where that's happened.
Yeah, I think so much with commitment is just having that trust with yourself, and yeah, you see that moment where you go to do it and then you stop, and yeah, the way I like to think about it is, if you have that urge to do it, and if you commit 100%, that's what's going to keep you safe, and that's what you're going to do it. But injuries happen when you commit, but not fully. You commit like 80% or 90%. And yeah, I think a lot of that comes from when people struggle to commit, comes from trying to rush it and trying to do it before they're ready. And that's why I think it's fantastic. I think Dom Tomato does it so much. Cliff jumpers do it. The 3-2-1 send it. It kind of comes back to that. And I see a lot of people do the 3-2-1, but then don't send it. They do like 3-2-1.
Oh man, the pains of just hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, when I always see it's like, no, don't do that. Because you're just like training yourself not to trust yourself. It's like, I think the reason people do that is like, oh, maybe if I start counting, then I'll do it, But I think for me, when I do a 3-2-1, I know I'm going to do it. Like, there's no time when I do a 3-2-1 that I don't do it now,
Really? That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I won't start it. And like, talking about that's getting to that space before, like, that's the whole process. And it's like, a lot of it is just like, just focusing on the goal and then just getting there. And then yeah. When I hear myself counting, I'm like 3, 2, I'm kind of like, I feel like a third person just like watching myself. And I'm just like, oh, I guess it's happening. And I'm just there for the ride, like
wow,
jumping.
That's
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
There for the ride.
But,
yeah, damn. That's that. I mean, that the way you phrase that is almost like a letting go, isn't it? It sounds to me. I feel that from you talking. It's like it's been decided. It's been decided.
Yeah. It's gonna happen. It's been decided. I have no control, and it's nice because I trust myself to that level that I can just be like, okay, it's not me doing it. It's just happening. And
I love that. It's not me doing it. Yeah. Damn, that's crazy.
It's like that control that we were talking about before. It's like letting go, like control. It's like, yeah, you don't need to control it. But yeah, in terms of coaching people through it, it's just like, only do the 3-2-1 when you're ready. When you feel like that urge to do something, trust that urge. And a really good way to practice doing that is to do it with smaller jumps and to be aware of it.
Yeah.
It's like when you feel that urge and you do it and go for it, it's like, that's amazing. Just be aware of that, and then kind of build it up, and then it gets to the point where you can do it in like these moments when it matters. Another way I like to, I think it's the same mechanism but extends into other areas of your life. It's that level of trust in yourself, and I think it's just it comes to doing things that you say you're going to do. A lot of times we were like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then we don't do that. It's like, oh, I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to do whatever it is, or like it could be something simple like, oh, I'm going to meet up with some friends tonight, or I'm going to brush my teeth, If you make a habit of doing these things that you say you're going to do, it's so powerful, because that's like you're making a promise to yourself, and then you're honoring that promise, and you're trusting that promise. So if you again can build it up, like start with like, oh, I'm going to brush my teeth now, and you go and brush your teeth, oh, I'm going to cook dinner now, and you go and cook dinner. Oh, and then you kind of build it to like, oh, I'm going to, and if it's something like huge, like start a business, you can say like, oh, I'm going to take a step towards starting that business. Something that's like tangible, small enough, and you can kind of do that. And it's the same with like committing to a jump, right? It's like, oh, I'm gonna do this jump, and you actually do it, and it's kind of, it's really good, really useful.
Absolutely, I think this is such an important point and can apply to parkour, but also to all, many areas of life. It's just like, less of this vague, less of this like maybe if I feel like it. This is such a. I mean, it can come from many places. I'm not trying to play people down for being unsure about things. Okay, I'm not doing that. But I agree. There's so much power in being like, I'm going to do this at this time, and then you do that at that time, and you're just like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to live. This is how it's going to happen. I'm not going to flake out. I'm not going to, do things just when I feel like them. Right. I'm going to commit to something and get it done.
Have that integrity.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Nice. I like that. Now we are running out of time. So just if we can squeeze it in, I found the question from Instagram.
Yes.
It's from a young chap, bless him, Noah Haig, who is part of a young rising team in Nova City called Team Zeal. They are doing bits on YouTube and Instagram. He asks, how do you mentally keep a trick or a flip?
How do you mentally keep a trick or a flip? So like once you've learned it, how do you keep it in your arsenal?
Yeah.
I think, that's a good question. I think that happens a lot, especially with developing skills. You like put a lot of time and energy into learning something, and then you move on to the next thing, you learn something else, and then you could kind of lose that, right?
Sure.
I think I haven't thought about this too much, but what I would say is just to revisit it, revisit it again and again. And even if you've moved on, make sure you're doing it like once every month, once every now and then. I think having your practice is really important, just because you get lots of time and lots of exposure, and having lots of variety is really good. So it's really good to focus on building one new skill and one new thing, but it's also important to revisit other things and then look at ways to keep that, because you want the stimulation, right? You don't want to just do the boring thing that you've learned ages ago. So look at ways, different environments that you can do it in. Look at ways you can connect it. Look at different entries to it. Look at different exits to it, whatever it is. See if you could link it to different things and just make more connections. It's kind of like a memory, like I'm having memory consolidation. If someone tells you their name, you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then straight away you forget it, right? But if someone tells you the name and you say, oh, nice to meet you, Dave. And you say it again, like, okay, bye, Dave, at the end. And then also you're like, oh, Dave, that's my cousin's name. And just, so you make lots of connections. That's a really, really good way to keep it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you. That's I think you're the right person to ask on that, because you seem to have a pretty big inventory of tricks and flips. So you're kind of juggling with holding on to all of those and learning more, hopefully. So we have come to the end there. Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much. That was really enjoyable for me. I love talking about fear, and when I've seen your stuff recently, I'm like, this is what I'm focusing on a lot as well. I'm really interested in the psychological aspect of parkour, how we deal with fear, how we come up with ways of overcoming fear and to overcome physical challenges. And I think you're doing some really interesting work. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For people listening,
Yes.
Louis, where can they find you? Where's best to look at what you're doing, and plug yourself.
Yeah. So I've got 2 Instagrams. I've got Move with Louis underscores between. That's kind of my personal one with parkour and a little bit of everything. And then for the fear stuff specifically, I've got Exploring Fear, and I've got the website as well, exploringfear.com. These would be the best places, to reach
Excellent.
out. And
Great stuff. Well, hopefully we can chat again. Maybe we'll bring you back on again, maybe with more guests as well, just to make things even more interesting.
Definitely.
And appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for listening so much. I am injured, but I'm gonna still use this kind of opportunity to get the podcast back and rolling again. So I'll be releasing more episodes soon. So thank you so much. Thank you, Louis. Have a great day, man.
Thank you. You too.